Yes, we can see your screen now.
Okay, great. Okay, now I wish I could see all your faces as well, you know. So now I can see my PowerPoint screen. Okay, you can see it too, right?
Yes, of course we do.
Okay. You see, why it matters, TSOP, is very simple, because teacher's sense of plausibility, it's something that is not very clear. It lacks clarity. So it's something considered very fuzzy. Now, what's fuzzy actually?
So, excuse me, sorry to interrupt. Could you just please keep the full screen mode, sir?
Come
F5.
again?
F5. Could you please press F5 so that your PPT will come on full screen mode?
F what?
F5.
F5.
F5. 5, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I've done that. F5. Nothing happens.
It's slideshow, sir. Can you just go to slideshow?
Slideshow.
Next to the volume button below, you have an option slideshow.
Next to
the volume button. Sir, it's absolutely fine, sir. You may just proceed. I hope everybody is able to follow with this kind of screen, right? Sir, no issue, so you can please proceed. It's quite visible, so it's quite clear.
It's clear?
It's clear, doesn't matter.
Now I can't see you all, you know. I can only see my slide. Okay, so teach a sense of plausibility. You need to bring some clarity to it, because it's something that's very fuzzy. It is like impression marking of compositions. Experienced teachers who are working on evaluating writing, for instance, they are. Can you still see my slides?
Oh, you have stopped presenting.
Oh, really?
Please open the PPT again. Please open your PPT again.
Now, I don't know how to share this and still have the screen. Never mind. I'll continue this.
Is fine, sir. This is fine because we can see both you and your screen.
Oh, great. Thank you. So teacher's sense of plausibility lacks clarity. It's like impression marking of compositions. A lot of people say that if you are an experienced teacher, you don't need an instrument to help you to mark your compositions, because an instrument is structured. So a lot of experienced teachers actually can mark compositions very well without using any evaluation scale or something. And that's why a lot need to be done in areas which are fuzzy, like the evaluation of writing, which a lot of people feel that now that if you need an instrument, you can correct your essays better than when you don't use an instrument, which is quite wrong, because experienced teachers always mark impressionistically much better, and they are able to do it without an instrument. And that's because of the years of experience they have gathered in, and they have the knowledge of accurately predicting what a score for a composition would be. So TSOP is like that. There are two basic beliefs of the past which I now consider myths that will be discussed in this presentation. Number one, teachers blindly follow as they were taught, and teachers do not innovate, which are both wrong, because if you look at a teacher's sense of plausibility, it is able now to determine that no matter how much that you are taught in university in a teacher training program, no matter how much you have done in university, no matter how much of knowledge you've acquired and learned at university about teaching, that when you come out into the field, you adapt, you make adaptations, you don't blindly follow as you were taught in university. There's also the chance that you will be innovating, you'll be making changes which are new and which are not recorded because you're a teacher and you believe that, whatever you do need not be, researched and written about. And so it's all within you. Nobody knows about it. All right. So the beginnings of this kind of thing can be seen as far back as 1937, where, Patterson's 10 axioms of language learning was an attempt at deriving principles from notions. Teachers have notions of how things work. So Patterson, in as early as 1937, decided to gather what teachers considered as notions of good teaching. And so he came up with 10 axioms of language learning. And then later on in 1996, teacher maxims was introduced by Jack Richards. And he said that this is the guidance that teachers depend upon when faced with instructional decisions. So what people are assuming is that no matter how much you learn in university about teaching, no matter how much you read about it in textbooks and references, that when you go into the classrooms, these are special circumstances, very, very localized and very, very your own context. So within your own context, you make decisions which are quite different from what was taught to you. So what is teacher sense of plausibility? It's a state of teacher knowledge which evolves out of personal experience. I like the word evolves because this differentiates things. This differentiates everything. This differentiates this TSOP from everything else, like teacher maxims and best practices which came out from the past, evolving out of personal experience, which means here you have your own knowledge which you have gained from university, and then when you go into into the actual workplace, teaching in a classroom or teaching in a university lecture hall, suddenly these two bits of knowledge merge and something new comes out of it, quite innovative. And so TSOP is actually a very interesting concept. A very interesting concept. Oh God, now I've got this thing with this. Okay, very interesting concept. And this was actually initiated by Prabhu in 1987. He claimed that while teachers can be trained in knowledge and skills, their knowledge evolves with experience, and no matter how much training, pre-service and in-service they're exposed to, they eventually do a lot of adaptations to that knowledge, thus suggesting teachers develop their own personal theories. Isn't that interesting? Okay, so, their own personal theories. And this is interesting because this concept originated in India, in Bangalore, in 1987, and yet nobody else picked it up in India, and only in recent times has it been revisited. Quick look at the literature, and this is recently, and it came about because Professor Alan Maley in the UK started talking about this in 2011 and 12, elaborated on what Prabhu said about teacher's sense of plausibility, and he came up with new ideas and came up with a compilation of narratives of expert teachers talking about this phenomena. And Gu, in one of Alan Maley's book chapters in 2019, consider this. A participant at his workshop states this: I like your ideas, sir, but it does not work with my students. And this is from a Chinese context. And all these chapters are compiled by Professor Alan Maley in 2019, Developing Expertise Through Experience, and it's a British Council book, the narratives of 20 experts discussing their own TSOP. It's free. It is on this. You can take a photograph of this slide. And of course, I'll be sharing this slide with the organizers. Just remind me to send it to you, and I will give it to you. But what has happened is that Professor Alan Maley in the UK, in 2019, he got 20 of us experts. I was one of the 20. Professor Alan Maley wrote the foreword together with Professor N.S. Prabhu, India. And these 20 experts wrote about their own experiences with TSOP. And it's available on www.teachingenglish.org.uk. It's a free downloadable book. It's a very good book, actually, with a lot of experience. The follow-up research was done by myself, Professor Maley, and Professor Alfie Hyde in Saudi Arabia. And it was published in 2020, also available free because it's Journal of Asia TEFL. It's an open access journal. It's Q1 and it's open access. So the title of that follow-up research was Teacher's Sense of Plausibility, reflected in the narratives of 20 experienced teachers. So this is the thing. So you see, it's an interesting that if you find narratives like this, narratives are primary data, and primary data is very rich. Okay, it's a write-up of people's thoughts of what TSOP means to them. And so what I did with my co-researchers, Professor Maley and Professor Alfie Hyde, Abdulaziz Alfie Hyde, was to actually do a qualitative research and try to get up the main themes from all these 20 experts writing about their experiences on TSOP, and we published that article in this journal. Okay. Of course, for this session, I want to look at a study in progress, and that's because the previous slides, slide 8 and 9, would actually look at the beginnings. All right, the beginnings of TSOP, which are documented in a serious manner. Of course, Prabhu introduced this in 1987, but very few people actually took up on this. And what happened is in 2019, there was a serious effort to bring this topic back into focus. And so Alan Maley gathered 20 of the experts and asked them to write about how TSOP affected how influential TSOP, teacher sense of plausibility, was in their own personal lives. So that led to me and my two researchers studying these narratives and coming up to what commonalities exist among these experts with regards to their TSOP. Now, you need to look at slide 8 and 9 and then read it up on your own. But now I want to talk about a study in progress and give you perhaps another view as to how you can go about investigating TSOP. What I did was I looked at one teacher. Master teacher. In Malaysia, if you're a master teacher, that means you have gone one rung up. So you're not considered a normal teacher anymore. You're an expert teacher, and you're paid very handsomely as a master teacher. It usually comes after years of experience. And of course, why did I choose a master teacher? Because I need to do comparisons with the 20 experts. Remember the 20 experts who wrote narratives in the previous studies? Yes, I wanted to do that. So to see whether the 20 experts were actually university people. They were quite well known, all of them, and they had done extensive research in their areas in English language teaching. Why master teacher? Because teachers never publish and very much, but they probably have a lot of their teaching modeled along the successful teachers. So we wanted to do comparisons with that. So 2 research questions were addressed. 1, how was the timeline of the subject's TSOP defined, and what were its characteristics? Does the TSOP evolve like from where you start in the profession and end differently when you retire from the profession? That was my interest. And then number 2, how does this school teacher's subjects TSOP compare to that of experienced and accomplished educators, EAE, in academia? These established and experienced and accomplished educators, EAE, were the 20 experts which Professor Alan Maley invited to write in that book, which was published by the British Council. So you see the connections between the two. And in this particular study, which is now in progress, and the write-up is being done up, which will be published maybe in a year or 2, maybe this year, maybe next year. The subject was a 63-year-old Malaysian school teacher who had an undergraduate degree in applied linguistics and a master's in TESOL from the US. He was selected from a pool of 25 candidates, all with at least 20 years of teaching experience, promoted to rank of master teacher, the highest recognition in the public school system for excellence in teaching. And his timeline, subject's timeline, starts in 1987 in School 1. He starts teaching in 87. His first posting, Amara Junior Science College in rural Malaysia. He was then posted to 2 other schools. School 2 commencing 2000, School 3, 2004. In 2011, he was posted to Mara headquarters, the secondary school division, where he was head of the English section, and was responsible for planning of curricular-based programs, teacher appraisal, teacher professional development programs. So he started his career 87, and we studied his progress, his TSOP, right through to 2016. Okay? The instruments were a questionnaire with 2 parts. Part 1, you had to create a timeline. Now, a timeline is a very interesting instrument. When you tell somebody to create a timeline, you're making him describe his TSOP from the day he started, okay, and then to the day he finished. Then you ask him to compartmentalize if there were parts which differed from each other, if there were phases of professional life which differed from each other. All right? So, so based on different types of TSOP experiences when confronting problems, rationalizing them and seeking solutions, and elaborating on how they differ, something commonly used in research on teacher professional development. And if you refer to Bailey, Curtis, and Noonan, 2001, they also give you examples of how people can get data out of timelines. Part 2 required the subject to write about the most important issue, case or episode within each of the phases in that timeline, where he felt something did not work and how he went about finding solutions to it. Why was this part 2 important? That's because, as you can see, part 2 is like getting more focus on TSOP. If he said something didn't work and how he made changes to it, that is going to reflect on his TSOP, teacher's sense of plausibility. So what he learned in the past did not apply in his particular context because his thinking was quite different. He knew things didn't work, and so he had to go about it differently. The second instrument was a semi-structured interview. Retrieved, and the data was retrieved from field notes which the lead researcher had gathered from 2014 to 2016, observing the subject doing teacher appraisals, mentoring sessions while he was conducting workshops on a language game he had developed. So, a semi-structured interview plus documents, field notes, and things like that, which the researcher actually followed this subject for many years, because we were working on professional development together. So data collection, the subject was asked to respond to a questionnaire within 72 hours, which is part 1 and part 2. Data was also collected by interviews over a period of 10 months, 40 hours, September 2019, 15 hours face-to-face, and then 2019 to 2020, 25 hours via phone, March 2020 to December 2020, frequently lockdowns, COVID-19 lockdowns, and of course we were gathering field notes from the period 2014 to 16, written while the lead researcher and the subjects sat at the back of classrooms observing and assessing teachers. Okay, data collection and analysis continued iteratively and recursively until the researchers realized that data saturation has set in. Data analysis was fairly simple, straightforward. Content analysis and inductive thematic analysis used to analyze data for research question 1. Okay. And then data collected for research question 2 was analyzed through deductive thematic analysis based on the 5 descriptor TSOP framework for experienced and accomplished educators, which was developed by myself and my co-researchers in 2020. And the 5 descriptors were: background or history of personal experiences affect the experienced and accomplished educators, EAE, experienced and accomplished educators. Key personalities in their philosophies affect influence the EAE. The use of non-conventional methods and approaches is common among EAE, and humanistic approaches to teaching are characteristics of EAE, and materials used among EAE is usually not mainstream. So we started comparing for research question 2, we started comparing how different this master teacher was compared to the 20 experienced and accomplished educators, which were in Alan Maley's book. Okay, the 20 narratives, which were analyzed by myself and 3 others and published in Asia TEFL. All right. So how was the timeline of the subject's TSOP defined, and what were its characteristics? Now, interesting. There were 4 phases that were actually found to be very clear in this research. There were 4 phases, and these 4 phases. Phase 1 was 1987. Remember the year he started teaching? That was 1987. 1987 to 1990, and this was like approximately 87, 88, 89, 90. It was about 4 years. 1987 to 1990. It was what the subject said was a period of disorientation and adjustment. You see, interesting. We will get to the details later. And then phase 2, around 1990 to 1999, approximately 9 years, was intense job-related learning, relearning, and exploration. So you would say that phase 2 was like a step up from phase 1. Phase 1 was all about problems. And if you look at studies done on novice teachers in English language teaching, you will find a lot of commonalities, because novice teachers all speak the same language. They are frustrated, they are angry, they are not given guidance, they are left alone, they are learning on their own. So disorientation and adjustment, phase 1. Phase 2, suddenly you have more confidence, you start learning, relearning, exploring. Phase 3 was the part, 1999 to 2010. And more than 9 years, almost 10 years, was the part where the subject says that he's more assertive, he becomes more authoritative. It's like he suddenly has got the power to act. Okay, and phase 4, this is like 2010 to 2016. 2016 was the year the subject retired. It was a period of gelling philosophies, about 5 to 6 years of gelling philosophies. You become more and more confident. You almost resemble a philosopher. So, when you meet people like this and they give you guidance, it shows that they have come to a stage of gelling philosophies. That's phase 4. Okay. According to the timeline, the first and shortest phase, which lasted approximately 4 years, the subject experienced disorientation and adjustment. This was followed by an approximately 9-year phase of intense job-related learning, relearning, exploration. Next, the subject went through the phase of assertiveness and authority on the job that lasted approximately 11 years. Finally, after 24 years of teaching, came the phase of gelling philosophies in which the subject was able to see himself as an emerging teacher philosopher. That's about 11 years. Now, phase 1, I told you, it's about disorientation and adjustment. And according to the subject, this was the most testing time of his 30-year timeline. The most testing. Common words used were confused, hesitant, unable to, frustrated, things like that. Sick to the core, all right? Words that he used that were associated to his attempt at adjustment. You see, most schools don't give you the time for adjustment because they just give you jobs after jobs, especially if you're a young teacher. You're not only given the biggest loads in teaching, you're also given a lot of extra jobs. And a lot of studies on novice teachers tell you that novice teachers are treated badly, okay, and have very little guidance from the other teachers and things like that. Okay. Okay, the timeline, the data collected from the subject, timeline, part 1 of questionnaire, cases, part 2, revealed that coping with the communicative approach to language teaching was the biggest challenge confronting him during this phase. Why? Because the communicative approach was found, the 3 sub-issues regarding communicative approach was the negativity around communicative approach. It was the official method endorsed by the curriculum development, but it was not necessarily accepted because Malaysian schools are filled with students and learners who naturally reject the communicative approach because they are not very verbally inclined and very communicative, and you force an entire new approach on them when all this while the audiolingual method was the preferred method in Malaysian schools, and situational curriculums were in place. A lot of memorization took place in Malaysian classrooms, and communicative approach required people to talk to each other, and it was failing because Malaysian students normally are not used to communicating like that, especially in a second language classroom. So what happened was the issue, teachers took it in their hands to hybridize communicative approach, incorporating the PPP. The PPP, as you know, it is like in the older methodologies which were introduced into English classrooms. PPP actually stood for presentation, practice, production. And this was very, very common in most language learning situations where grammar was emphasized. And Malaysian students obviously loved it because it was a way in which there was a scaffolding present. And students learned step by step. They memorized all these routines, practiced also in a very guided form. And then production was also very guided. So communicative approach was actually allowing too much freedom, which the students themselves did not like because they wanted to be led by the teacher. The cultural incompatibilities in cult was that it was very Eurocentric. Obviously, because the participant in this study said that how can you impose something like communicative approach on Malaysian students, because it was something that was more in line with what happens in Europe. So the teachers, the subject believes, so classroom reality is better than curriculum developers. And if the tests emphasize mostly grammatical competence, you see, Malaysian tests, although they say they follow the communicative approach, most of the tests are so grammatical, which actually it closely fits the previous methods used, like the audiolingual method and techniques like the PPP. And so teachers take this into their own hands and say, well, if the exam is based on grammar, let's train our students to be also be good in grammar. And so while the communicative approach was not well liked by teachers, what they did was they adapted and they hybridized it. So they came up with their own versions of CALT, which is communicative approach to language teaching. And of course, PPP was nicely embedded within their CALT. Actually, if the proponents, the people who invented the communicative approach saw this, they would be very angry because, you know, it's an Asianized version of communicative approach to language teaching CALT, and it included the PPP. So, and you see the Western notions of the PPV was the Malaysian teachers, which the Malaysian teachers use, was discredited by a lot of foreign experts as not reflecting learning sequences as established in second language acquisition research. And that was said by Skehan in 1996. And contrary to humanistic learner-centered methodologies, which Brown said in 2007, yet Malaysian teachers believed in it because it worked. Learners also expected teacher participation a lot more during classroom procedures. So it was not the case for facilitation. Communicative approach to language teaching was saying that teachers must be facilitators, which Malaysian teachers didn't agree. They believed that the students preferred teachers to intervene more. So it was not facilitation. The phase 2 of this TSOP of this teacher was the phase of intense job-related learning, relearning, exploration. It was a time in his professional life where he felt he was making sense of why things worked and didn't work, and was beginning to throw out old practices he inherited. And it was also a stepping stone. He said it was a time where he discovered that this was a stepping to successful teaching, the initiation of solid teacher support. It is interesting. A teacher like this, during the second phase, realized that interaction with students is more important than coming up with new methodologies, where they find it very difficult to follow some of the procedures within the methodology. So he started talking a lot more with his students in the classroom, started identifying with them themes that he could commonly talk about. When the student wanted to get out of class and go to the washroom, for instance, you know, he exploited that and asked them to say where you're going to a washroom, and he said, can you come up with other words that are synonyms to the washroom, and they say toilet and things like that. So he was beginning to see how he could exploit things like this into learning. And so, all right, his TSOP, the subject belief, had determined the priorities in his professional life. It led him to the belief that student-teacher rapport was of utmost importance in learning. He started becoming more relaxed by not getting straight into the lesson, but warming up, chatting with his learners. The learner-teacher rapport helped achieve learning outcomes faster. Okay, he was, while his writing classes in the past were limited to prose modeling and preparing students for timed writing exams, He declared that his TSOP reinforced the belief that fluency was never associated to modeling, but came about from a writing relationship that was forged through journal writing episodes. So he made his students keep journals and he responded to each one of them. So, and then the boys and the girls will start having more confidence in him, talk about their inner secrets. And so their writing got better and better because they were interested in writing about the things which they felt was interesting to write about. Okay. The TSOP of the subject led him to strengthen the belief that adaptation can lead to innovation. So, you know, Scrabble is a very elitist game. If you have a very high command of English with a vocabulary load that's also high, you could play Scrabble. But you see, these were like pre-intermediate level students in the junior science colleges. And what he introduced was he brought the Scrabble pouch into the classroom, but he kept the Scrabble board aside because he suddenly realized that many of these students couldn't play Scrabble because they didn't have a high vocabulary load. But he invented his own game. He invented Grabble, where students in groups of 5 sat on the floor, picked up words from the pouch, and took turns to place their tiles on the floor one by one. Someone who had a tile that could form a word associated with the themes that they were studying. Let's say they were studying about friendship in that theme. Immediately placed his tile to form the word and grabbed all the tiles. So it was like forming an entire word in Scrabble, except that he didn't have the board. And when he started using a theme like friendships or getting to meet new friends, and there was a word associated with that theme, they started using these tiles and putting them down in a row. As soon as somebody found the last tile to complete the word, and then they would shout bingo or something like that, you know, and then grab all the other tiles. So he started for doing a new game. Phrase 3 was the face of assertiveness and authority, and he was beginning to form his own ideas. Okay, he started SEED, School-Wide English Enrichment Development Strategies, a collaborative reading program where everybody in the school, from the clerk to the teachers to everybody, started reading a passage per week for 10 minutes and then started working on vocabulary and things like that. So nobody was spared. Even the gardener was involved. Then in 2004, he started Scope. Okay, and this was very revolutionary because he was now a master teacher and the head of department. He could do his own things. And in Form 1, this is like, we have 6 years of primary school in Malaysia, and then you go into Form 1. That's the start of secondary school. He did something very, very revolutionary. And, you know, in most other circumstances, if you're teaching in a normal school, the administrators will come down hard on you because you're never supposed to innovate. But he started this SCOPE, School-Wide Communication Program, where the first 5 months, semester 1, in Form 1, when they're 13-year-olds, they did nothing but oral communication. And all the competitions were organized for the kids, from dramas to quizzes to spelling bee to song and everything most teenage kids loved. And this emphasis and fluency were the foundation, the very first bricks to building this their language proficiency. And that's interesting, isn't it? So this was the phase 3 back. And of course, phase 4 was the phase of gelling philosophies right up till retirement. And he started putting into these notions onto his fellow teachers and saying, this was when he was already an administrator in Mara headquarters. And he said that he was very confident that teachers put into effect, first of all, like things like the emphasis on oral communication to come before anything else, then this philosophy, he said, that he had would actually lead to success. So he started implementing the out-of-class English programs in his schools. So because he was an administrator right now in the headquarters, he started saying that he walked in, he even told his teachers in schools that if he walked into classrooms and he watched a teacher for 5 minutes, he would be convinced of that teacher's commitment towards teaching. So he knew teacher competencies very quickly by looking at the first 5 or 10 minutes of teaching. So this is where the researchers believe that he was becoming a philosopher of his own. And then research question 2 was to compare these teachers' TSOP to other experienced and accomplished educators. I will move fast, very fast, because we are coming to the end. And this is, of course, deductive. This data was deductively put into themes, and he found that these were compared to the 5 descriptor TSOP of the previous experts, which were in this 2020 publication. The framework was there, and he found the differences in most. There was only one major difference, which was in descriptor 2, key personalities. Otherwise, this participant shared mostly the same characteristics. Like Spiro and Farrell, he never liked many of his English teachers in school. They used the textbook a lot, meaningless grammar drills. Now, this descriptor 2 is the only one that differentiated this participant from the rest, because the 20 EAE of the previous research, they were all accomplished researchers. So they knew a lot of things in the literature. And so this participant, being a school teacher, didn't compare with the 20 in the previous research. Okay. Then descriptor 3, most of the experts use non-conventional methods. This teacher also used a lot of non-conventional methods. He used a lot of songs in teaching. All right. Just like Mishan 2019, Spiro 2019, Faradas 2019, all thinking that songs can do a lot more than other things in classrooms. That this participant in this research also used humanistic approaches, always believe that errors are supposed to be appreciated, that students do errors because teachers are supposed to view errors as feedback about their teaching. So if these errors are recurring, the teacher has to make changes to his own teaching, just like the other researchers in the 20 experts. All right. Descriptor 5, materials used among EAE, not mainstream. Yes. So many people amongst the 20 experts who were researched on in the past were similar to this participant in this present research. They hate textbooks. And so this teacher as well was also moving towards total abandonment when we started researching him. Very much like the dogme classrooms or textbook-free zones, which were elaborated on by Thornbury, by Underhill, and by Kucha. The implications of this study reveal that this master teacher, who was only a school teacher, is very similar to the 20 experts who are university professors and who are very widely published. Basically, among the 5, only in descriptor 2 they differ, because descriptor 2 actually states that they are influenced by other philosophies and they read very widely. And this master teacher, of course, didn't have that time, because if you're a school teacher, you're doing so much teaching that you don't have time for other things. So that basically is my presentation. And I hope to finish 10 minutes before time, but it was not possible because we had some glitches. And so fine. Maybe we can have another extra 5 minutes for questions if you'd like. So thank you very much for giving me the time to speak. Yeah. Any questions?
Sir, am I audible?
Yes. Yes, I can hear you.
Yes. There's so much research on ESP and near-field context, but the TSOP teacher sense of plausibility seems to be quite exciting, the very terminology itself. So my question to you is, based on the insights that you gave about the background of N.S. Prabhu and starting from Alan Bailey and your work, teacher sense of plausibility and the learning outcomes are usually based on teachers' pedagogy, teachers' epistemology, and their observations and their experiences. Now, when we count the learners, is there anything called the learned sense of plausibility where we bring them as a variable and improve the pedagogical implications of what we do? Are students an important construct in the research?
That's a very good question. That is a very good question. From a research perspective, that is very exciting. The only problem being, that's really exciting. The only problem being explaining to students, to learners, what TSOP is, because just taking into consideration the teachers as a construct, you must remember that when I first started researching this, I had to actually interview teachers on what teacher sense of plausibility is, and none of them were aware of the terminology. So none of them were aware of their terminology, and that could be a problem. But what you can do is, over a lengthy period of time, you can use learners as a construct in this research, and you can actually research their input based on classroom observations. Okay? Which means comparing different ways of teachers teaching the same topic, for instance. That kind of thing. Sometimes the teaching of prepositions can take place in Form 1 and by one teacher, and Form 2 by another teacher, and Form 3 by another teacher. And maybe students can be also asked about these things as well. But like I said, it is a very fuzzy model. It's a very fuzzy model. It is like impressionistic marking. If you ask students questions on their perceptions on how teachers mark their compositions impressionistically, they might not give you provide the responses that you need. Maybe across time, after exposure to several episodes of working with students, maybe you can. But at the moment, like I said, it is an exciting prospect trying to get learners to be a construct in this sort of research, but it would take a very, very long time, because even teachers were not aware of what TSOP was when we first started working on this research. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, sir, absolutely. Crystal clear, sir. Thank you so much. There's one more question, sir.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, doctor. My question is,
Yes, good afternoon.
suggest teachers to keep something like diaries as travelers used to have something like travelers logs? Would it be helpful? That is, if teachers keep a diaries.
Another good question. I would say that teachers' diaries, you see, one of those things we fail to do is when teachers first join the profession, they are never keeping diaries. You see, they probably keep their own personal diaries about the fights that they have with their boyfriends or girlfriends or their fiance or their in-laws, but they're never keeping a professional diary of what goes on in classrooms. So that could be a problem. So what I would recommend is maybe for your new teachers from now, you can ask them to keep diaries of their teaching. And that might be useful. Of course, like travelers' diaries, teacher diaries can also be an important source of data, very, very primary data, which you gather and you can analyze after maybe a few years of teaching. That's also a very good question, and I hope that answered your question as well.
Yeah, sir. I have another question for you.
Okay.
Teachers of English, we do get qualifications with this literature degrees, but is there any qualification which is related to this TSOP as it is the recent developing thing? Is there any exclusive courses for that?
No, unfortunately, it's so new. In fact, the man who actually started this, Professor N.S. Prabhu from Bangalore, he started it, and Alan Maley decided to do the promotion for him because much as Professor Prabhu is very famous and known worldwide and has written a very important book on language learning and teaching based on the Bangalore project. You see, there has not been much coming out of India, and so it's lately only very sporadically mentioned by Western researchers. Now, what you probably need is an interest in people doing more work on that area. I'm afraid there's no specialized course on TSOP. Like I said, it should be a part of an area which we know, but we do not put emphasis on, which is teacher professional development. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
So thank you very much for answering those questions. I have a few questions to ask you, not related to this session, but on behalf of the Department of English and as my head of the department requested me, I have two obligations to place before you. Number one is, are there any possibilities for research collaborations? For instance, you spoke about teachers' sense of plausibility, and our question was, can we include students from the important constructs? So in this regard, if we do any kind of collaborative projects or collaborative research, our university and your university, is that possible? Is the first question, sir. And secondly, we have a full-time research scholars who are pursuing their research in English language teaching. Is it possible for them on an exchange program to come over to Malaysia and do a course there? So these are the two clarifications. So if you could please clarify, we'll be glad.
Okay. The first question, what was it again? I forgot. Yeah. Wait. It is about the first question is about joint research between the two universities, and like I said, I only started work in this new university, Taylor's in January this year, and perhaps we can study that possibility where we work on joint research. Although most institutions are very hesitant about funding for research these days, because after COVID, all finances have been reduced very much, and I'm not sure about that because I'm new to the university. But collaborative work like doing some kind of presentations here and there, that could be possible. That could be possible. But like I said, in this area now, I seem to be the only one who seems to be researching in this area. All my co-researchers are from Saudi Arabia and from the UK, and I'm not sure how Malaysia can be involved in this thing. But what we can do is, as soon as I get a new PhD student interested in TSOP, then there can be the possibility of mobility, moving from India to Malaysia and from Malaysia to India. That could be a possibility. Yeah, I like working together, but at the moment I'm a lone researcher in this area. Although in my area of textbook research, I have a lot of people who graduated with PhDs from textbook evaluation and things like that. Textbook evaluation, if there's joint research and movement from Malaysia to India, India to Malaysia, that could be possible in textbook evaluation, which is, I have a following here I have a textbook research following, because a lot of my students worked on textbook research.
Thank you so much, sir. You just clarified our questions.
Yeah.
And thank you very much for this truly insightful presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
So just a common vote of thanks. May I request Harry to give the vote of thanks.
Good afternoon, all.
Good afternoon.
A better way to listen is not with your eyes, not with your mouth, not with your ears, but with passion and presence of mind. I'm Harish Shankar from B.A. English Honors. Thank you everyone for taking the time to be here, and I feel honored to present this vote of thanks on such a special occasion.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you
I'd like
very
to
much.
thank the management, Pro-VC Dr. T. Murugesan, Registrar Dr. N. Raja Hussain, for giving us the opportunity to conduct this event. We'd like to thank our honorable guest, our resource person, Dr. Jayakaran Mukunda, Professor and Senior Research Fellow at Taylor's University, for his insightful thoughts on TSOP. We indeed learned a lot in this session. We'd also like to thank the Director of Data Center, Dr. Ayyanathan and his team, Senior General Manager, Mr. V.N.A. Jalal, and the estate of his team for their support. We'd like to thank the Dean of his School of Affairs, Social Sciences and Humanities, and their support. Dr. Ayub Khan also. I'd like to extend my thanks to our HOD, Dr. P. Ratta, for initiating this program. Also, we'd like to thank our coordinator professors, Dr. Uma Maheshwari and Dr. Vijay Kumar, and our faculty members for organizing this program. I thank Ms. Fahima and Nazira for hosting this program. And my thanks are due to the participants, scholars, and students of the Department of BA English. Finally, I thank Mrs. Sarmila and Vijay for their support. Thank you, Honorable.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much for having me.
National Register, we would like to have more stages in future. So in the contact table, perhaps we will discuss a lot. We would like to have more sessions in future.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.